Okay, let's set the scene. Imagine you're living in Europe, maybe around the year 1340.
Hmm.
For most people, your whole world is just a small village you were born in. You're a poor farmer, and your life is basically controlled by a powerful local landlord.
A system that had been locked in place for hundreds of years. I mean, landlords had all the power. There were so many people, so much labor that you were completely replaceable.
If you cause trouble, there are 5 other guys ready to take your spot.
Exactly. But that entire order, that whole world was about to be just completely shattered by the Black Death.
And we're not just talking about cities. This plague tore through the countryside, right? Where almost everyone
Oh,
lives.
absolutely. The speed was terrifying. We have records of entire families, a mother, father, all the children just gone in 3 to 5 days.
And they had no idea how it was spreading.
None at all. So the chaos was just total. You have fields abandoned right in the middle of a harvest, crops rotting, and the survivors just paralyzed with fear.
It really sounds like the end of the world. But here's the twist in the story. You
Yeah.
said before the plague there were too many workers.
Far too many. But when the Black Death kills, and this is a conservative estimate, a third of the entire population.
A third.
In some places, it was half. The basic rules of supply and demand just flipped completely upside down. It was a demographic catastrophe. But for the common people who survived, it created this huge, unexpected advantage.
Their labor suddenly became valuable.
Incredibly valuable.
So this is where the economics get really interesting. When the plague passes, you've got these huge estates, hundreds of acres of land, but no one to work them.
Right. Suddenly, landlords who used to treat peasants like they were nothing are facing total financial ruin. Their land is worthless without workers.
And the workers who are left, they start to realize this.
They do. For maybe the first time in centuries, they realize they're indispensable. You can't just be replaced by some other family from the next village over because that village is half empty too.
The power to set the price for labor shifts.
It moves from the landowning class directly to the working class. It's a fundamental change.
So what did they do? Did they just ask for a raise?
They didn't just ask, they demanded it. They understood their leverage. Before the plague, you might work all day for just a few pennies.
A pittance.
Now, they were refusing to work unless landlords paid them in silver. They were demanding double, sometimes even triple, their old wages.
Okay, but I have to ask. If wages suddenly triple, doesn't the price of, say, bread just triple too? How does that actually help anyone?
That is a fantastic question, and normally you'd be right. But this is where the massive population drop becomes so important.
Ah.
Because so many people died, the demand for food, especially grain, also plummeted. There were just fewer mouths to feed.
So you have triple the pay, but your biggest expense food is actually getting cheaper.
Exactly. Your purchasing power just skyrockets.
Mm-hmm.
The landlords had to pay these new high wages or watch their entire harvest rot. This flood of cash into peasant hands was, well, it was revolutionary. Money, not old traditions, started to dictate how life worked.
And this wasn't just about getting paid more. This was the beginning, the end for the whole medieval system. Let's talk about feudalism for a second. What did it really mean to be tied to the land?
It meant you weren't free. A lot of peasants were serfs, which meant they were legally part of the lord's estate, like property.
So if the land was sold,
You were sold with it.
yeah,
And a huge part of this was something called feudal duties. This meant you had to work on the lord's own fields for free, maybe 3 or 4 days a week, before you could even start on your own little plot of land.
unpaid labor.
Forced, unpaid labor. But after the plague, why would you do that? Why would you work for free when you know the lord down the road is desperate and offering silver coins?
You wouldn't.
You wouldn't. The whole system just collapsed. The economic pull was stronger than the old laws.
And people literally just walked away. They left the villages their families had lived in for generations, even though it was illegal.
Absolutely. They chose freedom. Landlords tried to stop them, of course. They tried to enforce the old laws, but it failed.
Why did it fail?
Because even the lord who caught a runaway peasant couldn't afford to punish him. He was just too desperate for workers himself. So this new mobility, this simple power to choose who you work for, that cracked the whole rigid structure of the Middle Ages wide open.
You start to see yourself as a free agent, not just a piece of property.
Exactly. Your skills have value.
So on top of wages and freedom, the plague created this other opportunity, land. With so many families wiped out, huge numbers of farms were just empty, no heirs.
A massive amount of vacant land. And for a landlord, Land that isn't being farmed is just turning back into wilderness. It's not making any money.
So they were desperate to get people onto it.
Desperate. So they started renting out these empty plots really, really cheaply just to keep them productive.
Which means a person could go from being a day laborer selling their work to suddenly being a farmer who manages their own land.
Yes, a tenant farmer, growing their own crops, selling the extra food at the market for a profit. This is really the beginning of a kind of rural middle class.
It's a level of security they had never known.
Never. And the benefits just ripple outwards from there. Take diet, for instance. With a smaller population, there was way more food to go around for everyone.
So you're not just living on, what, thin porridge and coarse bread anymore?
No. You see a huge shift in the records. Peasants could suddenly afford more dairy, fish, and most importantly, meat.
And better food means healthier people.
Stronger, healthier people. And critically, children had a much better chance of surviving into adulthood. You can see the progress physically.
Even their houses got better.
Yeah, they invested their new money.
Ah.
Those old mud and straw huts started being replaced by sturdy houses with timber frames. They'd add extra rooms, buy things made of pewter instead of wood.
Pewter was a big deal.
Oh, a huge status symbol. It was durable, it was clean, it was a little piece of luxury. Life just became more comfortable, more sanitary.
Of course, the old ruling class, the nobles, and the government, they're watching all of this happen, and they're not happy.
Not at all.
Yeah.
They saw this as the world turned upside down. In their view, the poor were getting too greedy. They were forgetting their place in the God-given order of things.
So the government steps in. They try to force things back to the way they were.
They do. They pass a major piece of legislation called the Statute of Laborers.
And what did that law say?
It was basically a declaration of war on the workers. It had two main points. First, wages were to be frozen at the low, pre-plague levels.
So an enforced pay cut for everyone.
Exactly. And second, it made it illegal to leave your employer to go find a better-paying job. It was an attempt to just outlaw the free market for labor.
They were trying to chain people back to the land with laws instead of tradition. But it didn't work, did it?
It was almost impossible to enforce. The government can pass a law, but it can't magically create more workers. The labor shortage was still the reality.
So the landlords themselves would just ignore it.
Many did, yes. Secretly, they'd offer the high wages anyway because getting their wheat harvested was a lot more important than obeying some law from the king.
And this tension, this clash between the workers demanding their rights and the elites trying to suppress them, it all boils over.
It does. It leads directly to the massive uprising known as the Peasants' Revolt in 1381. This wasn't just a small protest.
This was thousands of people marching on London.
Thousands. And they were angry about the Statute of Laborers, about new high taxes, and they had a central demand: and serfdom. For good.
And they were very strategic about it, weren't they? They targeted legal documents.
Yes, that was the amazing part. They would march into a lord's manor, and they wouldn't just loot the place. They would find the manor records, the pieces of parchment that legally tied their families to that land, and they would burn them.
Destroying the evidence of their own bondage.
It was an incredibly powerful symbolic act. Now, the army did eventually crush the revolt, but the message was sent. The common people understood their own value, and they would not go back to being treated like property.
Looking at the long-term legacy then, that cash in the pockets of the working class completely changed the economy.
It really did. They became consumers. All these little villages started hosting regular markets because for the first time, the local population had money to spend.
And that creates opportunities for other people.
A huge ripple effect. Suddenly, if you're a blacksmith or a weaver or a carpenter, you have a massive new customer base. You're not just serving the local lord anymore.
So the economy shifts from being based almost entirely on land ownership to being based more on cash, on goods, on skills.
That's the crucial turn. The old system where nobles held all the power because they owned all the land, that starts to die out. You see the rise of a new group of successful farmers and merchants. They're not nobles, but they have money and influence.
Which means, for the first time, social mobility is a real thing. You could actually improve your station in life through hard work and skill, not just by who your parents were.
And with that comes a need for education. If you're running a farm as a business or you're a merchant, you need to know how to read, write, and do arithmetic. You need your children to learn. The old, rigid walls between the classes started to break down, paving the way for the more modern society we know today.
It's an incredible story of resilience. These people lived through one of the worst disasters in human history, but they used that disruption to demand a better, fairer life.
It really is. And that revolutionary idea that your value comes from your own skills and your own labor, not from your birth, that idea really took root not in a king's castle, but in the muddy fields of the 14th century.
Good luck with your studies.